This is an RNZ podcast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Your Money with me, Mary Holm. Thanks for taking just a few minutes to listen in while Jessie Mulligan and I talk through some useful ideas about how to make your money work better for you. Just remember though, this is guidance. Final decisions are up to you. Over to Jessie.
Mary Holm is in. Hello there.
Hi, Jessie.
You giving some car trouble, Mary?
Oh, yeah.
I hope you've got an emergency fund if your car needs,
I'm a member of AA, Jessie, so all's well.
Okay.
I'll be right. Yeah.
Well, we're glad you got here on time. And as I said, you are crunching the numbers for us this week.
Yeah, well, towards the end of our last session, right at the end, you said someone sent in a message asking about dollar cost averaging, and I said, oh, we can't do that in 1 minute. It takes a bit more time. But it's worth thinking about, and that got me thinking, well, what else could we talk about? And so I've got three little, I'm sort of calling them number games, and before everyone turns off their radio because they don't like maths, they're all easy numbers, I promise. And
I mean, I'd turn off my radio if I heard dollar cost averaging. That sounds very technical and dense, doesn't it?
It's awful.
Yeah.
And you know,
we should be able to come up between us. We should be able to come up with a better term.
We should.
Than that.
We'll work on that.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe after listeners have heard all about it, some of them could think of it, because I've never understood what that name really means.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
It is confusing, and I hate the way lots and lots of New Zealanders say they're no good at maths and they don't like numbers and they turn them off. In fact, in my book, I put a little thing where it says maths alert. You know, this next little bit is going to be mathematical. If you can't bear numbers, move to the end where I've written the main point of this is because I didn't want people to just stop reading the book. But I wish people would try a little bit more with numbers. They're actually quite good fun.
Yeah.
I know that's when you say that, you sound like a bit of a worry. But anyway, moving on to...
They probably just, awaken some traumatic memories from people of being in maths class and not getting it. There's nothing worse than when someone's trying to teach you something and your brain just won't compute.
I think that maths might have been taught very badly. I hope that's no longer the case. It's kind of like solving puzzles, a lot of it. And if it was presented more like that, like a little bit of fun. Anyway, enough of that. Dollar cost averaging. This is something that happens in KiwiSaver to just about everybody in KiwiSaver, unless you're in the very, very lowest risk fund. So it happens in also outside KiwiSaver in any investment where the balance can go up and down as the markets go up and down. And, even in the second level KiwiSaver funds, the conservative ones, as opposed to the bottom defensive ones, there are some bonds, and bond values can go up and down. And then as you go up the risk ladder, the value of the investments goes up and down more and more. So this applies to any investment that goes up and down where you're investing a regular amount, the same amount or roughly the same amount every month or every week or whatever. And so for employees in KiwiSaver, that's what's happening. They're getting 3% or more of their pay going in regularly. For the self-employed, you might remember last time we had a letter from a listener saying she was self-employed and they were always neglected on KiwiSaver stuff. So let me say, for self-employed people, I highly recommend that they set up putting $87 a month into KiwiSaver rather than putting a lump sum in once a year to get the maximum tax credit. $87 a month or $20 a week will get you the amount you need to get the maximum tax credit. And if you do that, then dollar cost averaging will also help you along. So to explain what it is, I was out walking the other day and I thought, how can I explain this? And I thought about asparagus, bunches of asparagus.
Great.
Yeah.
I love an asparagus-based metaphor.
Okay, Jessie, tell us another one.
I'll think of one.
There's a challenge here.
Yeah.
Let's say that, this is a bit silly, but that you're willing to spend $10 on asparagus. And in the height of the asparagus season just before Christmas, it costs $2 a bunch. So you're going to, for your $10, you're going to get 5 bunches. And then in the depths of winter when there's no local asparagus round, it might cost $10 a bunch because you're buying some imported asparagus from America or somewhere. So, okay, so in the summer it's $2 a bunch, and in the winter it's $10. So your average price is halfway between 2 and 10, which is $6. That's your average price, and you've bought 5 bunches with your $10 in the summer, and you've bought 1 bunch with your $10 in the winter. So you've got a total of 6 bunches of asparagus, and the average price is $6. So you would think the total you've spent is 6 times $6, which is $36. But you've actually only spent 20. You spent 10 in the summer for your 5 bunches, and you've spent 10 in the winter for your 1 bunch. So you've only spent $20, and it feels like you've got $36 worth of asparagus.
Yeah.
And if you stop to think about it, it's quite simple. You've bought more when it was cheap. You bought more. You got 5 bunches when it was only $2 a bunch, and you've got only 1 bunch when it was $10 a bunch. And that's exactly the same thing that will happen if you're feeding into a KiwiSaver account. When the units in the KiwiSaver account, we talked about units last time, they're just like the little shares in the KiwiSaver account. When they're cheap, you're going to get more. When the market's gone down, in other words, you're going to buy more units. When the market's gone up, you're going to buy fewer units. And that means you buy bargains. You get more when they're cheaper. And it automatically happens, but it's kind of good. It's counterintuitive. The asparagus analogy works to some extent, but with asparagus you're eating it right away, and so you're not worried about the future value of asparagus. You're just thinking, today this is what it costs, and I'm going to have it for dinner tonight. With shares, it's quite different, of course. You're thinking shares are cheap at the moment, but what I really want to know is what they're going to be worth next year, or maybe 30 or 40 years away if it's in retirement. And so
the cheaper you got them for in the first place, the better, really.
The better it is, yes. But if it wasn't for the fact that you're regularly putting a fixed amount in, you might, if you're just sitting out there investing, it's kind of counterintuitive. When the market's gone down, people often say, I don't want to buy right now. It might keep going down to zero. And if it was an individual share, if you were buying a single share, this applies to that as well. But with a single share, it could go down to zero. But in a KiwiSaver fund or another fund where there's a whole lot of investments, it's never going to go down to zero. They're not all going to go to zero. And in fact, we know that over the long term, it will go up again. It always does. So it's something that just happens anyway, regardless of whether when you're in KiwiSaver or any other investment. I say to people, if they're already in KiwiSaver and putting in enough to get the incentives, they might want to do further saving outside KiwiSaver so that they keep access to their money. And it's quite a good idea. It is a good idea to set up automatic payments into your other savings as well as into KiwiSaver, so it works for everything. But there's a bit of a but with dollar cost averaging, and that is that what happens when you have a lump sum, when you suddenly get a big amount of money from an inheritance, or you've sold the batch, and you're not going to buy another one, or you've won the lotto, or you've sold your business, or whatever, you get a big lump sum. Should you then just invest the whole lot at once, or should you drip feed it into the investment? Let's say it's into a KiwiSaver fund or into a non-KiwiSaver fund, whatever. And when I was writing about it in my Herald column a few months back, I got an angry letter from someone because I tend to say drip feed it.
Oh, you're a drip feeder from way back.
Yes.
You're the same with bringing foreign currency in.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. That was something I was going to say in a minute, getting onto the foreign currency. But with drip feeding money into, say, KiwiSaver, and I said that in the column, and I got quite an angry letter from someone saying that's wrong. It's not the correct way to look at it. You should be putting the whole lot in straight away. If you get a lump sum, you should put the whole lot in, because otherwise you're keeping some of it out of, let's say, a share fund in a bank account, and it's earning a lower return. And In fact, Vanguard did some research on it a while back and looked at the numbers of what was going on in the market, and they concluded by quite a small margin that it was usually better to put the whole lot in as a lump sum. And I thought about that and I thought, well, that's okay when you look at the numbers only, but it's not okay psychologically. You know, people, if you put the whole lot in one go and then the markets go down soon after, you're going to feel really sick. Yeah. And they might stay down for quite a long time. Yeah. And so psychologically it's easier if you say, I'm going to put a quarter in now and then maybe a quarter in 2 or 3 months and another quarter after that, etc. Don't do it over too long a period, because it is absolutely true that while it's sitting on the sidelines, it's on average not earning as good a return. But it's easier for people to drip feed it in, I think. And, you know, in fact, I got another letter the week after that from somebody else in my Herald column referring to the first letter as from the dollar cost averaging police. and he or she said they're all over the place, and any time anyone mentions dollar cost averaging on the internet, they come swooping down and say it's incorrect, it's not right for lump sums. No one's debating that it's right for KiwiSaver, where you haven't got a lump sum, where you're just putting regular payments in, but for lump sums. My conclusion in the end is that it's all very well saying that the numbers say you should put the whole lot in straight away. But because people then start saying, oh God, what will happen if the markets go down soon? They quite like to sit on the sidelines and ponder what time is the best one to put it in. Whereas if you just say, I'm going to put a quarter of it in now, then people get on and do it. And so I think there's a sort of cycle, you know, we've got to look, they're actually people here, they're not just robots.
Great.
Yes.
Well said.
Yes, yeah.
So I hope that makes sense to you. You can always go back and listen again. That's dollar cost averaging. Mary Holm, our personal finance expert, is in Playing with the Numbers today. What is the rule of 72?
The rule of 72 is another one this actually doesn't apply to KiwiSaver because it applies only to where you make a one-off investment, and a typical one will be buying a house where you put all the money in on one day and buy the house. And it's just a handy little trick for working out. There are two things you can work out through it. One is how long it will take for your investment to double. And so, for example, if you say, I want, you know, I've got inherited $10,000 and I want it to get to $20,000, how long will it take to do that? If you were in an investment that was paying you, say, 4% a year, you divide 4 into 72, and the answer to that is 18, and that tells you it's going to take 18 years to double. So how many years will it take to double? You divide the return you're expecting to get into 72. It's actually an approximation, but it works. It's pretty close to correct, and it just makes the maths much easier. Or if you say, I want my money to double in 10 years, you say, okay, I've got to divide 10 years into 72, and that means you need to get a return of 7.2%, strictly speaking, around 7%. It's more commonly, though, it's used the other way around, where people have got an investment that already has doubled, and often that's a house, although it certainly can be any other investment, but not a KiwiSaver one where you're drip feeding your money and it's got to be a lump sum one. So if the value of your house has doubled, let's say it doubled over 12 years, then you say 12 into 72 means you got an investment return of 6% a year. If it's doubled in 8 years, you say 8 into 72 means you've got a return of 9% a year. It's for listeners who are listening to this and say, what the hell's she going on about? It's not something you need to know. It's just an interesting thing. An interesting way to especially look at what's happening with property. So,
Great.
Yeah.
Rule of 72.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've also crunched some numbers to look at what happens to an investment in KiwiSaver over the long term.
Yes, and just a couple of messages on this. Let's say you're 40 years in KiwiSaver, so you got in at 25 and went through to 65, or roughly that sort of thing. If you invest in a high-risk KiwiSaver fund, and I would highly recommend that if you're getting in at 25, unless you're planning to take the money out in the next few years to buy a house, because then it's a bit too volatile. But otherwise, it's a really good idea to get into one of those high-risk funds because they grow so much faster over time. And that's the point here. When you look at those numbers, especially over 40 years, you'll have almost 3 times as much in a high-risk fund as you will in a low-risk fund. It's 3 times as much.
It doesn't look much different, does it, when you say if a high-risk fund's getting, 7% and a medium risk is getting 5% and 3%. It doesn't like 2%. It doesn't look like much at all.
Doesn't look like that much difference. That's exactly right. But if you look at the numbers, for example, in a low-risk fund, one lot of calculations I did, you would end up with 380,000, or about a third of a million, a bit more than a third of a million at retirement in a low-risk fund, whereas you'd come up with over $1 million in a high-risk fund. It's a huge, huge difference. And it's really, really good if people can get the courage to go into that high-risk fund over the long term. It makes such a difference, and stick with it when the markets go down. Yeah. And then the other one is not looking so much at high and low risk as looking at high and low fees. And the difference here is not as dramatic, but still, when I was crunching through the numbers, if you're in this high-risk fund I'm talking about over the long term, if you go with the lowest fee fund in KiwiSaver currently, you'll end up with about 1.5 times as much as if you go in the high-risk fund currently.
Boy.
And 1.5 times as much is still a heck of a lot more to have a lot of fun with in retirement. So that's the kind of message that I'm trying to get to here, is first of all, get in there. It even just a couple of years difference makes what was I looking at? 22-year-old versus 25-year-old in a KiwiSaver fund. 22-year-old will end up with 500,000. 23-year-old will end up with, the younger one will end up with 600,000. The one who got in 3 years later will end up with 500,000. So it's 100,000 difference just for getting in 3 years earlier. Yeah. And putting in only 3% of your pay, it's only a few $1,000s, but at the other end, it's $100,000, and so it's really good idea to get in early, and B, go with high risk, C, go with low fees. Yeah. Yes.
And that's, whenever Mary talks about KiwiSaver, she says much more important than the brand of fund you're choosing is the style of fund, whether it's high risk, low risk, medium risk, and also the fees that your fund charges. Someone told me, we had an expert on the project the other night, they told me 1.25% was the average fee. So if they're charging you more than that, then it's too high, and less than that, you're getting a pretty good deal probably.
Yeah, you want under 1%. I mean, go onto the KiwiSaver Fund Finder, which I'm always talking about, and rank your the Kiwi. First of all, you've got to know what level of risk your particular KiwiSaver fund is, and the Fund Finder will help you work that out. Whether you're in a low risk, defensive, conservative, balanced, growth, or aggressive, and then have a look at your fund versus all the others on fees. Rank them by fees. You can also rank them by return, but I recommend you don't take much notice of that, because the ones that have got the highest average returns in the past quite often end up turning around and doing badly in the future. Yeah, they go all over the place.
Okay. Yeah. I have received an email from the dollar cost averaging police, but I won't make you answer it on the fly, Mary. We'll come back to it next week.
Do you want to give it a try? Or
okay. Hi, Mary. Dollar cost averaging only works for non-exchange based transactions. Any share buy costs $30 per transaction. That could be $360 a year, says David.
Oh, that's an interesting point. If you are buying little wee parcels of shares, then you're probably better off doing it once every 6 months or once a year because of the minimum brokerage. So yes, if you're going into an investment where there's quite high brokerage upfront costs, that could modify what you're doing here. But I generally recommend people go into KiwiSaver funds or non-KiwiSaver funds anyway, because they get the diversification and lower entry costs, etc.
Great. Hope that satisfies you, David. Thanks, Mary.
It's a pleasure, Jesse.
That's Mary Holm. And we podcast all of Mary's contributions to the show. If you head to rnz.co.nz and click on the series and podcasts page, you can subscribe, which means that if you miss one of her sessions or you want to go back and listen to one on your usual podcast player, it's easy to do.